Okay, this is the course of Psy 1010, General Psychology. It is the third week, and it is March 18, 2021. Welcome. So in this week, we have some fantastic titles of psychology. At first, we want to talk about one of the first titles, first topics, hot topics in psychology. It's about learning. So we know that the basic of learning was about animal psychology. How can you define learning? What is learning? How do you think about it?
I think learning is the ability to gain certain information that you may have never known in your life. And obviously you're taking in new stuff that could possibly help you in any certain point or in any certain situation, for example.
For example, when you learn driving, is it about information? Driving. It's a procedure.
Yeah,
Is it
it's more
about
of a
information or
procedure.
not? Yeah.
I think that is more of a procedure, but you also get information on like the certain street rules that you need to know, like
No, for
when to
example,
make
horse
certain
riding.
turns.
When you want to learn horse riding, a leader is about information. All of it is about observation, other horse riders, and repetition, and again, practice, and progress.
Yeah,
What do you think about this type of learning?
I think that's better because when you're observing something new, you're taking that in and you're getting a visual of how it's done. So as you repeat that same information,
yeah,
over and over,
do you consider
it starts.
Do you consider horse riding as information or a skill?
No, I think that's more of a, I guess, hobby.
Yeah. So we can find the answers, the specific answer, the precise answers of this very primary topics of psychology. Also, the advanced theories of learning is for the 20th century, but the primary questions is about after Renaissance, after starting to the industrial evolution. Because of that, we enter to the age of learning and modern learning age. So our learning outcomes are describe the basics of classical conditioning and how they relate to learning, give examples of line conditioning principles to human behavior, explain extinction, discuss stimulus generalization and discrimination. Okay. The basic of classical conditioning. Before entering, I want to introduce something to you and other people that in the next hour will see this video, that we have three types of learning. At first, I learn to have some specific response to a specific stimulus. It is trigger. The stimulus is the trigger of my response. So the first is the stimulus. The second part is response. It is classical conditioning. Why I answer, for example, as a escaping from a tiger, because tiger has a very huge, for example, body, and I feel fear inside myself, and I will go out and running fast and escaping. So the first part is stimulus and responding, answering. It is learning. We will talk about the different types of learning. This type of learning is classical conditioning. Conditions my responses to a specific stimulus, and conditional and unconditional. Other parts, I learn to do something because of the expectation of the future, because of the expected gains, expected outcomes, outputs. It is other types of learning, operant learning. So we have two parts. First, stimulus and response. It is classical conditioning. And the second part is apparent conditioning. It is I do something, I learn to do something, to have some behavior, some types of thinking, some types of, for example, uh, emotional experience. Why? Because I think and I predict to have some outcomes in the future. Always it is desirable outcome. We don't go for undesirable outcomes. For example, in alcoholism, you see this type of learning. You drink and drink and drink, and you expect it to have some, for example, euphoria after 1 hour. It is for the future, expectation of the future. The third part that we talked at the first of the class, it was about observational learning. Sometimes it is called social learning. Social learning or observational learning is a type of learning that you observe other people's and you see that how they can do some things, especially elite people, expert people, especially people that who are very acceptable for you. For example, your parents or your masters or your teachers or elite of your society, your community. You see how they do the things and you begin to repeat the same things at the same procedures. And after some practices, you will have some skills. And after some more practices, it is not, you are not the skillful, you are the master. So as an extra information, you should know, we have three types of learning: primary learning, skillful learning, and master learning. Primary learning, now we have some primary learning in this session. If you want to remember, recall the information you gained during this session, you should go to your book and look for the information or see the video again and find the yes, this is that, this is this. But repeat, repeat, rehearsal, rehearsal, rehearsal. After sometimes you are good at the information, you are good at doing something, especially in doing something, procedural memory. You will find sometimes of skillful learning. But if you repeat it and use it in an ordinary daily life experiences, after sometimes you will gain the master learning stage. Master learning stage is that it is always in your mind. You don't need to think voluntarily anything about the meaning of that thing. For example, about the 2 plus 2, you say equal 4. It is master learning. You don't want to think about it. You are mastering this type of learning. So we have three levels of layer learning: primary learning, secondary learning or skillful learning, and finally it is master learning. Learning. What is learning? Learning a relatively permanent change in behavior brought about by experience. What are the keywords at first? It is a change. The most important keyword in definition of learning is change. If you cannot find change, you cannot find any learning. Because of that, many people, many old people, many old age people, they don't have any change. They cannot change themselves. You see a very, very flat lifestyle. For example, for the last 30 years of their age, of their time life. Flat, with no risk, no up, no down, no change. And they say to you, I have a lot of experiences. And I say to them, yes, but you haven't learned anything. Why? Because you haven't changed. So the second part is experience. What type of change is called learning? The change brought by experience, not any permanent change. And the third part is permanent, not fully permanent. This is relatively permanent. So permanent change brought by experiences are called learning. For example, Some regulation in females from age of 15 to 50 or 55, it is menstruation or every 4 weeks again. Is it a permanent change in their body? Yes. Is it a change? Yes. Before 15, they don't experience any type of menstruation. And after 55 or 50, again, they will not experience any type of menstruation. This is a permanent change for near 4 decades, yes. So what? We cannot call this change learning. We have change and we have permanent change because it is not brought, it is doesn't bring about by experience or rehearsal. So these three elements should be together to define learning: permanent change experiences, or sometimes we call it rehearsal. For example, for learning the courses, you don't experience your mathematics, you don't experience your, for example, course of Sci 1010. You rehearsal, you read and practice, you read and practice, you read and practice. So relatively, it is not always, it is relatively permanent change in behavior brought about by experience. Also, the honesty, it is not always about behavior, it is about your action. When you talk about your actions, you talk about your thoughts, your emotions, and your behaviors. It is your mental acts. Welcome, Amy. You talk about your thoughts, your emotions, and your behaviors. So it should be observable and measurable. When we talk about behaviors, we are talking about something which can be observable and measurable. But classical conditioning, a type of learning in which a neutral stimulus comes to bring about a response after it is paired with a stimulus that naturally brings about the response. So we have neutral stimulus and natural stimulus, two types of stimulus. If you predict to have sometimes a specific response to some type of a stimulus, this stimulus is called natural stimulus. That call it is unconditional response. For example, you are hungry, you eat. What is your natural stimulus? Sense of hunger. What is your response? Eating. Okay. But for example, it was about the Pavlov. Pavlov talked about and had a very good experiments, which ends to gain the Nobel Prize. I think it is 1905, Nobel Prize for Pavlov. Pavlov was a Russian scientist, one of the basic scientists. Talk about the conditional, classical conditioning with the experiments on his dog and in his gastroenteric part, it is the abdominal part, it is the stomach part of his dog. And he saw that when he paired a natural stimulus is a stimulus that can create a specific response in yourself. This stimulus, this response, it is natural, okay. But when we pair with a neutral stimulus is not related to your response. For example, sense of hunger, giving food to the dog with the bell ring. After sometimes we saw that if only bell ring, we have bell ring, the gastroenteric, the digestive system as dog, has some response as bell ring is like some natural food, natural stimulus. It is called conditioning. In this type of conditioning, natural stimulus or food is unconditional. It is natural. But the bell ring is conditional. So we have two types of stimulus: unconditional stimulus, conditional stimulus. We have only one response. If our response is to natural stimulus, it is unconditional response. Natural stimulus, unconditional stimulus with the unconditional response. At the same time, with the same response, if we have this type of response to the conditional stimulus. This is called again conditional response. So in response, we don't have any change, the same response for two types of stimulus. Response to natural stimulus is called natural response or unconditional response. Response to neutral stimulus is conditional response or neutral, or only it is called conditional or conditioned response. Classical conditioning, we say it is Pavlov's experience. I talk about it. You can see here sound of bell and breaking of ears, and meat, again, salvation. You see, when they are paired together, sound of bell or belling with the meat, unconditioned stimulus, UCS. What is unconditioned? The sound of bell is unconditioned. Sorry, the meat is unconditional. And the sound of bell is neutral stimulus. If you have a ring bell, the sound of bell in front of a dog, there is no change in his digestive system. Why? What is the relative between the sound of the bell and digestive system? Nothing. There is no conditioning. There is no relationship. It is neutral stimulus. Not good, not bad. But when it pairs with a natural stimulus, which is, for example, here is meat, after some times, dog has habituated that yes, when I hear the voice of the bell, the ring of the bell, after that, I will give sometimes of food, for example, meat. Yes, it is pair and pair and pair. After sometimes we have only the ring bell. And when the dog hear the ring bell, his or her digestive system will active and wants to have meat. And for example, some hormones in the digestive system. It is called classical conditioning, the basic part of conditioning. Here you see, before conditioning, sound of bell, pricking of ears. Only the natural response to sound of bell is pricking of ears, not about the digestive system. And reaction or response to meat is salivation. It is called neutral stimulus. It is called natural stimulus, UCS. When they are during conditioning, they are paired together. We see salivation, not pricking of ears. And after that, it is after conditioning. Now it is called conditioned stimulus. The neutral stimulus become conditioned stimulus. Why? Neutral stimulus doesn't have any response related to the natural stimulus. Natural stimulus is meat. And at the third part, at the final part, you see, oh, we don't have any meat. Meat is the natural stimulus for sense of salvation. But after that, you see that this neutral stimulus, which is called, for example, ring bell, creates the same response in the dog, which is salvation. It is very easy, very, very easy. There anything you should know about the neutral stimulus and natural stimulus. The only definition you should know. What is neutral stimulus? The stimulus that cannot create any response in you. Any response. For example, you smell a flower and you expect to, for example, to have the sense of hunger. No. The sense of anger, again, no. Flower and the smell of flower is the neutral, not natural, neutral stimulus, for example, for creating the sense of anger. But if, for example, you see somebody that you have some problem with him or her, and every time you see him or her, his, for example, perfume is like the flower that you have in your garden. After sometimes when you go to your garden without that friend or without that gentleman or lady, you go to your garden and feel that, sorry, I'm a little angry. Why? There's nothing to make me angry here. See, oh, my mind has conditioned to feel angry, will smell some types of, for example, perfume. And now this flower, this natural flower in my garden has the same smell of perfume that that gentleman or lady had, that I had some problem with him or her. It is conditioning. The flower in your garden is a neutral stimulus for creating anger. In other people, it doesn't create anger. Why anger? It is a flower. Only in you create. Why? Because it is associated with the other experience, that experience is not neutral, it is natural. That experience, because for example you have some bad experience with sometime, every time you see him or her, you feel that you are angry, that you are fearful, that you are anxious and stressful and other negative emotions. It is very simple. Natural stimulus or neutral stimulus or unconditioned stimulus. Neutral stimulus before conditioning, this stimulus does not naturally bring about the response of interest, like bell. Unconditioned stimulus or UCS is a stimulus that naturally brings about a particular response without having been learned. Your response to natural stimulus is not acquirable. It is intrinsic. It is natural. You have born with it. You don't you don't learn how to eat your, for example, food. You don't learn how to cry. You don't learn how to grasp something. These are your reflexes, mother born reflexes. If you are a natural baby, if you are a healthy baby, you have between 4 to 6 reflexes. Reflexes are motor memory, mother born motor memory. This is the memory about your movement, which are mother born. You haven't learned how to cry because when you come to the world, you should have 4 to 6 movement mother born naturally to have some self protection. If you don't have them, you are at the risk of death. One of them is, for example, grasping. One of them is watching. You never learn how to watch the face of other people. Never learn. When you come to the world, yes, you know how to watch. It is natural reflexes, mother-born reflexes. These are motor memory, the memory of doing. Motor is mean movement. Motor memory is memory. You have some memory now, heuristic or genetic memory about how to do something. About 4 to 6 movements. For example, watching, grasping, crying, screaming. These are, and also some reflexes. For example, bobbing skill reflex at the end of your foot is a natural born. Also, it create it. You can find it about the after 10 months, but you never learn it. It is about the learning and not learning. These are unconditioned stimulus. These are natural stimulus. The stimulus that you have never learned how to respond to them. You know how to respond to them without any learning. These are your reflexes. Or if you have learned, anybody except of you have the same response to this stimulus. Sometimes you learn to do something. Okay. For example, in the process of socialization, you learn many social laws, many social ceremonies, many social rituals, cultural rituals from your culture, from your family, from your community. You learn them, yes. But it is the same for other people. Anybody knows, for example, it is St. Patrick's Days. And in America, it's St. Patrick's Days, and you know to do something, for example, in church and other parts. Amy, do you have any question?
No, I was talking about St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah.
It was
St. Patrick is a national day is a religious national day, a national day in America. Other parts, please know the abbreviations, acronym. UCS, on conditions stimulus, UCS. And on conditions response, UCR. Conditioned stimulus, CS, condition response, CR. U for on, C for conditions, R for response, S for stimulus. You have four words here: on, conditions, on view, conditions, C, stimulus, S, response, R. So we have UCS, UCR, CS, and CR. On conditions response, we are now talking about classical conditioning, how a stimulus can create some response in yourself or in other animals like us, especially in the mammals, especially in the higher grade with the higher functioning of the brain, especially in mammals and in homos. Homos, we are homo. We are erectus homo. We are erectus homo. And after that, we are now Homo sapiens. Homo sapiens is intelligent human. And now we are going to a Homo digitus. Homo digitus is another type of human being for the next 100 to 200 years after this time. It is Homo digitus, other type of being, other type of survival, maybe not only on the Earth, maybe on the other planets. This Homo digitus or Homo digital, sometimes it is called post-human being. Sometimes it is called transhuman being. Transhumanism is a favorite word in this era about what we are going to the next stage of our life. So natural, innate, reflexive response, unlearned response. It is unconditioned response. It is reflexive. It is unlearned. You know, but you haven't learned. It is your unconditioned response. You know, but you haven't learned them. You know how to cry, but nobody has learned to you that how you should cry. You know how to watch your, for example, mother's face, but you haven't learned how to watch your mother's face. It is unlearned. It is reflexive. Sometimes it is called intuitive. Intuitive is it, I know, but I don't know the source of learning, the source of knowledge. Only it is my intuition. And natural, innate, intrinsic, interpersonal, intrapersonal, and reflexive. For example, salivation to meat. But conditioned stimulus wants the neutral stimulus pair with the UCS to bring about the response formerly caused by the UCS. It is conditioned stimulus. This is a stimulus, this is response. I talk about it. We have two types of stimulus. One type of stimulus doesn't create any response. It is neutral stimulus, not related to that response. Other types is intuitive, reflexive, unlearned stimulus that creates some specific type of response. When we have this natural stimulus is called unconditioned stimulus. You haven't learned, it is unconditioned. And this response to this type of stimulus is called unconditioned response, UCR. You paired natural stimulus with a neutral stimulus. The stimulus doesn't have any effect on their response. Because of pairing, your mind create an association and think, yes, when we have neutral stimulus, after we will have natural stimulus, and when encounter with the neutral stimulus, your mind, your body, your behavior, your feelings create the same response in confronting with the natural stimulus. The same response in this position, this state is called conditioned response because it is a response to neutral, to conditioned stimulus. So human behavior also learned through classical conditioning, particularly emotional responses such as fear. I'm not in my hand. I cannot control my anger. I don't know why I am always fearful. I don't know why I am feeling such a way. I cannot find the roots. These are the conversations that you hear in a lot of positions in your life from other people, sometimes from yourself. We talk with ourselves. We have self-talk. What does it mean, self-talk? Self-talk is when I talk to myself to gain some results. It is self-talk. In these positions, one of the states that you should consider that is that you are encountering with a stimulus conditioning and condition response. You don't know why you have such a response to this neutral stimulus, but you have some responses. Watson and Rayner's experiment to classical conditioning little Albert to show fear of a rat. Watson and Rayner's experiment to classical condition little Albert to show fear of a rat. Please go to YouTube and see the videos about little Albert. Little Albert was, I think, 2 or 3 years old, or maybe less than this. And J.B. Watson was the founder of behaviorism, a great scientist. When Albert was a little boy, create the fear of rats by collaboration of his mother. And after that, create unconditioning of the rat in the same boy. It was an experiment, but on human being. When Albert became 20 years old, he go to court and has a lawsuit against Watson and his mother. They said, they have abused me. I didn't know anything about conditioning. They act to me like an experimental rat. I was not a rat. I was a human being. He went to court and shaped a lawsuit against Watson, J.B. Watson, and his mother. But it's a very great experiment. Some experiments in psychology are very great and very famous. One of them is the experiment with little Albert. We have very low quality movies and videos about this. It is near black and white movies, not high quality, but there are some movies, some videos in the YouTube you can find to see how Watson create the fear of rats in little Albert. And finally, we have neutral stimulus was rat. UCS was loud noise. Unconditioned stimulus, loud noise. UCR, unconditioned response was fear of the noise. CS was rat, CR, fear of that rat. These are the, okay. In conditioned learning, we have some other stages to face with the conditioned learning. Can we destroy the conditioned learning? Why? Because, for example, in fear, you can experience phobia. Phobia is not rational fear. Phobia is uncontrollable, irrational fear, not rational, irrational fear, uncontrollable. You know that it doesn't make sense for you. You know that it's not true, it's not correct, but you cannot control your feeling of fear. It is fear of sense of fear. It is irrational fear, phobia. And we went to the roots of your phobia and we find that you have some conditioning. For example, we did unconditional stimulus and conditioned stimulus. And there is no unconditioned and natural stimulus now. And you have sometimes encountering with some types of neutral stimulus, which were basically unconditioned stimulus. They were neutral. They shouldn't have any impact on your behavior, on your mind, on your feeling, on your thought, on your actions. This is phobia, irrational fear. What can we do and what have to do? Extinction. Extinction is to destroy your conditioned response to basically neutral stimulus. which are called conditioned stimulus. It is destroying this response. We want to create a new stage that you can experience this without any response. It is extinction, something like, for example, fire. How can you extinction fire? For the fire, you can use extinction for your behavior. What? Why? Because some triggers of your behavior are not related, logically related and naturally related to your response. You are responding to something which is not related to the stimulus. It is irrational fear. It is not natural fear. A previously conditioned response decreases in frequency and eventually disappears. At first, frequency. Second part is disappear. It is extinction. I talk about it. How can we do it? Spontaneous recovery is mean the reemergence of an extinguished conditioned response after a period of rest or further rest and no further conditioning. It is spontaneous recovery. After some years, suddenly you experience that I'm in the fear position. But for many years, I haven't experienced this fear, the state of fear. It is called spontaneous recovery, recovery of the same fear. You see here, these are the curve for up and down of the extinction. Other verbs and other phrases for conditioning, classical conditioning. The first one was conditioning. Second one was extinction of conditioning. Third one is generalization. When you cannot discriminate, you cannot differentiate between near and similar neutral stimulus, you cannot differentiate between them, and you have the same response to your basic conditioned stimulus, you have the same response to the other similar unconditioned or neutral stimulus. You cannot differentiate between them. It is called generalization and sometimes overgeneralization. Stimulus generalization. A conditioned response follows a stimulus that is similar to the original conditioned stimulus. The greater the similarity, the greater likelihood for generalization. For example, they say that if you have some facing with the snakes, it's my country a proverb. It's you have some facing with the snakes or with some snakes with some line on their skin, great skin. After that, you have seen some ropes, some line of ropes, for example, for fastening your seatbelts, or you're fastening, for example, your trees to the wall. It is rope. It is like snakes. And there's a proverb that say, when you have been bited by a snake, always you fear of other ropes. You know, these are ropes. These are not snakes. But because of the similarity between ropes and between snakes, you have the same responses to the ropes. Because of that is generalization. The more similarity, the more likelihood for generalization or to have the same answer. At the oppositional side, in the oppositional part of generalization is discrimination. If two stimulus are sufficiently different from each other that one brings about the conditioned response but the other does not, it is discrimination. Severe differentiation between two similar stimulus. Severe differentiation. It is called discrimination. So we have conditioning, classical conditioning. Destroying of conditioning is called extinction. You find the same and the similar stimulus with the same condition response. It is called generalization. And differentiation between the completely separated stimulus is called discrimination. 4 keywords: classical conditioning, extinction, generalization, and discrimination. The other part is about operant conditioning. Define the basic of operant conditioning. Any question about the classical conditioning?
Mm,
Nothing. You
no.
can find many types of classical conditioning in your daily life. Some parts of cultures, religions, habits are based on classical conditioning. For example, some rituals, cultural rituals. Every culture has some nonsense rituals. You don't know why you are doing this. And they said, it's a tradition, do it. You don't know what's the meaning. For example, in my country, when somebody wants to travel a long journey, we have put some water after his or her car. And we say the water is the mirror of the existence. And it shows that he or she will get back home safe. It is called safety behaviors. In psychology, we call them safety behaviors. The behaviors which is not related to your main goal. No, there is no logical relationship between, for example, water and car crash. No logical relationship. But these behaviors create in yourself some sense of safety, security. These are called safety behaviors or safety seeking behaviors. These are cultural rituals. All nations, especially some old nations like my country, with, for example, more than 2,000 years of written history and written culture, we have a lot of nonsense cultural rituals. We don't know why we are doing this because of the, for example, 2,000 years of doing and doing and doing. In these types of cultural rituals, you can find some types of conditional learning, habituation, generalization, and sometimes discrimination. Discrimination between the behaviors, not racial or gender or other types of discrimination. We are talking about the behavioral discrimination. The second types of learning is operant learning. This is the learning that we first used in circus for training animals to do something. The founder of classical conditioning were Pavlov from Russia, he was neurologist, and after that J.B. Watson from America, he was neuropsychologist and behaviorist. The founder of the word of behaviorism is J.B. Watson. What was the conditional learning? We have a specific stimulus and we have a specific response. Two types of stimulus, neutral stimulus and natural stimulus. Neutral doesn't create any response. Natural creates a response intuitive, innative, or reflexive, or without learning, unlearned responses. But now we are talking about other types of creating behavior. It is not always that my behavior is reactive to some part of active actions before me, which called stimulus. Sometimes, or not sometimes, honestly, many times, we create, we act in a specific manner because of the expectation of the future. For example, now presence in this class is related to the operant conditioning. You are here because you expect that after the taking and passing these courses, you will be undergraduated, for example, in a business course, in a business program. You do something now for the outcomes in the future. It is called operant conditioning. So the stimulus is not in back of the behavior, it is in front of behavior. When it is in back of your behavior, it is exciting, it is motivating, it is called a stimulus. When it is in front of your behavior, at first you can see the behavior, and after that you can see the outcome. It is called outcome, not the stimulus. It is related to the location, to your behavior. This is behavior. If the trigger is before behavior, this trigger is called a stimulus. If the trigger is after behavior, this trigger is called outcome. The first part is conditional learning. The second part is operant learning. Operant learning, doing something, learning to do something because of the future expectation, future outcomes. Define the basic of operant conditioning, explain reinforcement, and we will talk about the terminology now. So, Amy, say the four major terminologies, four terms of conditional learning. What were the words?
Four.
We had four major words. Matthew, what were the major four words of the classical conditioning? First, classical conditioning. Second
Second is
The
destroying the conditioning was called
um
the neutral conditioning.
no. We use it for the fire also.
oh the
When you want to turn off the conditioning, it is called
Unconditioned stimulus.
no. It was called extinction. Extinction
Oh,
was
extinction. Yes.
turning the conditioning off, destroying. When you want to use conditioning in a vast area, it is called
Spontaneous recovery.
No, generalization. The vast area, you want to use this conditioning in other areas of your life. And when you want to have some differentiation between different similar stimulus, but they are different. When you want to have some differentiation, this type of differentiation is called
stimulus discrimination.
Discrimination, perfect. So we have four major terms in conditional learning. At first, conditioning, classical conditioning. Second, destroying the condition is called extinction. Using overuse is called generalization. And differentiation is called stimulus discrimination. These are about classical conditioning. This is a stimulus, this is behavior, this is action, this is response. This response is not called action, this is called response. This type of action after an stimulus, it is a stimulus, the action after a stimulus is called response. But in operant conditioning, learning in which a voluntary response is strong, more likely to recur regularly, or weaken, less likely to recur regularly, depending on its favorable or unfavorable consequences. So we have response, voluntary response. It is voluntary response. Second one, we have consequences of action. This is action, this is consequence of action. In sometimes more likely to reoccur the response. In sometimes it is less likely to recur the regularly the same things. If it is increasing the likelihood, the recur of regularly the same response, it is called reinforcement. Reinforcement is, we will talk about it, increasing the likelihood of reoccurring of a response. And punishment is the decrease in likelihood of reoccurring or recurring of something. So we have action, some consequences, outcomes. Okay, let's go to the terminology. The process by which a stimulus increases the probability that the preceding behavior will be repeated. It is called reinforcement. Reinforcement is very important. I say to you that we will have a $1,000 scholarship to the top students of this course. You are studying your course here, and after 8 weeks is the consequences. You try to be the top student. It reinforces your studying. Why? Because your consequences, your predictable probability of consequence is so good for you. you want to gain $1,000, for example, scholarship after ending this course. It is reinforced. It creates the more likelihood to recur an experience, to recur an action. Probability that the preceding behavior will be repeated. Reinforcements, everything creates reinforcement is reinforcer. Any stimulus that increases the probability that the preceding behavior will occur again. It is primary reinforcement and secondary reinforcement. Primary is just the same that you can see that yes, if I study hard this semester, I will gain $1,000 scholarship at the end of the semester, for example, and they refund me from my tuition, $1,000. It is primary reinforcer. Sometimes I will say no. If you study hard and you will be the top student for 2 semesters, after you want to go to the market, we will have some specific recommendation for you to do, for example, great companies in Los Angeles. It is not direct to your action, but indirect, it is secondary reinforcer that motivate you to work harder and harder and harder. Or no, if you are top students, you will go to the, for example, CalMU Student Senate. And you are, if you are top student, you will be the, for example, secretary of the CalMU Student Senate. It is the secondary reinforcer. Again, it creates the more likelihood of the probability of the preceding behavior. But it is not directly, it is indirect. So we have 2 types of reinforcers, primary reinforcer and secondary reinforcer. Okay, let's go to break for 15 minutes and just as 7, yes, just as, no, just 30, just as 6:50 be here, okay, after 15 minutes.
I am back. Professor.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
I already got my textbook.
Yes. I cannot hear you, Amy.
What?
I cannot hear you.
Why? I can hear your voice.
Can you
Amy,
hear
can
me,
you hear me?
Professor?
I can hear Matthew. Amy, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes. Yes, the book is correct. Yes.
Yes, so
Perfect.
you have
Such a
to.
lovely book. Such a lovely book. I love it. Okay, let's go to the next part. And we have here chapter 5 and positive and negative reinforcers. What was reinforcer? The reinforcer was something that changed the likelihood of reoccurrence of an action or a feeling or an emotion or a thought. The keyword in definition of reinforcement is increasing the likelihood of recurrence. Sometimes it is positive reinforcements, sometimes it is negative reinforcer. What is positive reinforcer? A stimulus added to the environment that brings about an increase in preceding response. We have a preceding response. We want to increase or decrease the recurrence of that preceding response. If you add something to your environment, for example, uh, you study hard this semester, and I say you, yes, if you study harder and you will be at the first 3% in the higher ranking of your university, for example, you will have $1,000, or the second one, for example, $700, and the third one, $500. You have added something to the environment. What have you added? The, for example, scholarship or your the prize. Or sometimes we delete something from the environment. For example, you are in a prison and they said to you that if, for example, be a good prisoner, after that you have, for example, some decrease in the time of prison. You have deleted something from your environment in order to increase the likelihood of a recurrence. It is different. We want to increase the likelihood of recurrence of behavior. Sometimes we add something for this increasing. Sometimes we delete something for this increasing. Both of them end to increasing the likelihood of recurrence of an action. If you add something to environment, to the situation, for increasing the likelihood of recurrence of an action, it is called positive reinforcer. Why it is reinforcer? Because it increases the likelihood of recurrence of an action. It is reinforcer. Why it is positive? Because you have added something. Why it is again reinforcer? Because it increases the likelihood of recurrence of an action. Why it is negative? Because you have deleted something from the environment in order to increase the likelihood of likelihood of recurrence of an action. It is very, very precise differentiation between the positive reinforcer and negative reinforcer. Very, 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 very small and detailed, precise differentiation between the positive reinforcer and negative reinforcer. So negative reinforcer, an unpleasant stimulus whose removal leads to an increase in preceding response. So in positive reinforcer, you add some pleasant stimulus. In negative reinforcers, you delete some unpleasant stimulus. Because of pleasure, it is gain or avoidance. You want to gain the pleasure or you want to avoid the pain. As you know, the basic principles, the basic motivator and trigger of all human actions basically are based on two principles: pain avoidance and pleasure gaining. These are the major, pleasure and pain are the major principles of all human actions. If you want to avoid some pain or if you want to gain some pleasure, because of these, many of our actions are created, we are doing them because of avoidance of pain or gaining some new pleasure. Because of that, we create and we divided the reinforcers in two types: negative reinforcers and positive reinforcers. Okay. Oh, let me make it full screen. Yeah. After reinforcer, the other parts of operant conditioning is about punishment. What was the function of reinforcer? Reinforcement, the function of reinforcement was about increasing the likelihood of the recurrence of a preceding behavior, preceding thought, preceding emotion or feelings. Okay? But increasing the likelihood. The function of punishment, in contrast to reinforcement, the function of punishment is about decreasing the likelihood of recurrence of an action, of a thought, of a feeling or emotion. So in some parts we want to increase the likelihood. In some parts, other parts, we want to decreasing the likelihood of recurrence of an action. The first part is rewarding system, reinforcement. The second part is punishment system. Okay, what is punishment? A stimulus that decreases the probability that the preceding behavior will happen again. For example, in hard working for criminals, we have some types of punishment. In finding, for example, when you are in the highway, driving in a highway, and you enter into a construction zone, and the sign said you in the construction zone, you should pay some higher fining. Why? Because many people are working there. Workers are working on the shoulders of the road and other parts of the road. It is construction zone. It is the punishment to decrease the high speed, to decrease the probability, for example, of car accident with the workers. It is the punishment. They establish some punishment, they establish some fining for decreasing the probability, not the absolute, the probability, not the possibility, but the probability of recurrence of a preceding behavior or preceding action or preceding, for example, thought or emotion. So again, we have two positive and negative punishment. Note that in punishment and in reinforcement, when we talk about positive or negative, we are not talking about the plus. No, we are not talking about the positive or negative. We are talking about the minus or plus. When we say positive reinforcement, it is reinforcement based on plus something to the environment. When you are talking negative reinforcement, we are talking about the minus something from the environment. When you are talking positive punishment, it is punishment based on adding or plus something to the environment. When you are talking negative punishment, we are talking punishment based on deleting or minus something from the environment. So positive and negative as a prefix before punishment or reinforcements has the meaning of plus or minus. adding or deleting, not positive or negative as a moral, as a value-based concept. These are not value-based. It is about adding something or deleting something, plus something or minus something. So what is punishment? Everything that can decrease the probability of a probability of recurrence of a preceding action. It is called punishment. How can you create punishment? By adding something to environment, it is called positive punishment. By deleting something from the environment, it is called negative punishment. Positive and punishment, negative is meant plus or minus, adding or deleting, or everything that increasing the probability of preceding behavior in the future and recurrence of a preceding behavior in the future. It is reinforcement. What is positive reinforcement? Adding something to environment to creating reinforcement. What is negative reinforcement? Deleting something from the behavior to creating reinforcement. So note that I have seen many students or sometimes many experts have some misunderstanding of the concept of the meaning of positive and negative before punishment and before reinforcement. It is not the value of positive or value of negative. It's based on something like, for example, adding something positive and deleting something. Also, we call it in positive psychology. When we are talking about positive psychology, we are not talking about the positive values. We are talking about adding psychology. How can we add new strengths, new abilities, new values, new understanding, new powers to our life? So I like to call positive psychology instead of positive psychology. I like to call it plus psychology. Plus psychology has been the psychology that talks and investigates how to add something to your life. It is positive psychology or psychology of plus or psychology of adding. Okay. Figure 2, you say, okay. Intended results. When a stimulus is added, the result is positive reinforcement. You see here. When a stimulus is added, the result is positive reinforcement or positive punishment. If add something that ended to increase in behavior, it is called positive reinforcement. If add something which end to decrease in behavior, it is called positive punishment. If removed or terminated of to a stimulus that ends to increase in behavior, it is called negative reinforcement. Why? Because you have deleted something from the environment, but the result is increasing behavior, increase the behavior or reinforcements because of deleting something from the behavior. It is called negative reinforcement. If you delete something, if you delete something, if you delete something and you want to decrease in behavior, it is called negative punishment. Okay. The pros and cons of punishment. Punishment can be effective, but there are also disadvantages. Punishment can be effective, but there are also disadvantages. Frequently ineffective if not delivered soon after undesirable behavior. It is very important the time interval between the action, undesirable action, and your punishment. If we have a long-term interval between your action and your punishment, the effect of your punishment to decrease the probability of repeating a preceding behavior will be very, very weak. We don't have any good, we don't have any powerful, we don't have any strong effect of your punishment on decreasing the probability of repeating a preceding behavior. It's very weak effect, very weak impact on the decreasing of the probability of the preceding behavior, recurrence of the preceding behavior. So the first item to punishment is the time interval, the time duration, the time distance between receiving punishment and doing undesired action. Desired action, just after desired action, you should receive your punishment, you should receive your fine. Because of that, for example, in driving, when they give you some ticket, they said go to the court as soon as possible. If you go after 2 years, the effect, the impact of that ticket for decreasing the recurrence of your preceding behavior, as a, for example, behavioral fault driving error, the impact will be so weak. Second, physical punishment can send message of approval and even encouragement of physical action in other situations. There's a false belief about physical aggression. This false belief says that if you have some feelings of aggression in your body, in your mind, in your feelings, and you, for example, watch the movies with a lot of scenes of action, of aggression, of anger, you will be empty after seeing these actions. Your feeling will be empty. It is catharsis. Catharsis is meant your emotional emptiness, your emotional release. It is catharsis. In the previous years, the sciences of psychology says that yes, it is good, for example, for aggressive people, where people with a high level of experiences action, anger, it is very good to watch the movies with a lot of aggressive scenes. These watching will decrease their sense of anger. Perfect. But the next research-based facts, the next scientific facts shows that no, it is observational learning. We'll talk about observational learning just as after this chapter of operant learning. When you watch aggressive behaviors, when you watch aggressive actions, it increases the probability of recurrence of aggressive behaviors in yourself. It is observational learning. It doesn't release, it doesn't make your anger empty, it doesn't relieve your mental pain, your suffering, your trauma. It encourages you to do the same things. Because of that, it is a false belief that watching the action movies will release your desire to have some aggressive. It's a false belief. And sometimes difficult for punisher to control the degree, amount of physical punishment in the heat of the moment. It's very important. Um, there's a movie also, it is very deep conceptual movie about the nature of human with some types of very aggressive scenes. But at the side of conceptual art, it is a very good movie. Also, it is an old movie. I have seen it about, I think, 25 years ago. The title of the movie is Natural Born Killers by Oliver Stone. The director is Oliver Stone. Natural Born Killers. You see in the movie that sometimes our natural born talent to kill other people, our natural born wish to kill other people, other beings, animals, or sometimes human beings, is out of our control. Because we have also, I don't like to call it our evil side. We don't, I am human. I don't have any animal side or evil side. But yes, there's a good book by the title of Lucifer Effect. Lucifer Effect is a book, very, very profound and research-based psychology book about the nature of evil in our body, in our mind, how good people will become evil people. By Philip Zimbardo, The Lucifer Effect is the title of book, Lucifer Effect by Philip Zimbardo. These are the great books, the great scientific book. Philip Zimbardo was the president of APA, American Psychological Association, the most authoritative organization all around the world about psychology. It is APA, American Psychological Association. For 2 years, I think, that Philip Zimbardo was the president of APA. Philip Zimbardo has a very good book with the title of The Lucifer Effect. Also, the a movie about the natural born killers by Oliver Stone. And Philip Zimbardo, I think in 60s or 70s, conducted the most serious, dangerous, unethical experiment in psychology. The name of the experiment was the Stanford Prisoner. Also, there's a movie with the title of Stanford Prisoner. It is 2013, I think. The Stanford Prisoner, based on the nature of our animal nature, our aggressive nature, a non-human part of our human being, non-human part of our human beings. It is that the research conducted was interrupted in the middle of the way. The research interrupted. They said it is unethical. It was a very, 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 not fantastic, very negative, huge negative results from the research. We saw that general population, ordinary people, ordinary students are becoming some criminals only in experimental. It was not real world. It is experiment, but it is out of the hand of the experimenters. Philip Zimbardo could not control the experiments, so interrupt and cut the research. It is one of the greatest experiments, one of the greatest uh, events in the history of psychology. It is called Stanford Prisoner. You can find some good movies or some good uh, documentary about the Stanford. So we have now three titles. One, Natural Born Killers, the movie, very good movie. Two, the book Lucifer Effect by Philip Zimbardo. And three, it is Stanford Prisoner, the experiment in psychology with the title of Stanford Prisoner by Philip Zimbardo also again. Schedule of reinforcement, we have some timetable for the reinforcement. Schedule of reinforcement, different patterns of frequency and timing, two parts. Frequency of reinforcement and timing, time duration of reinforcement following desired behavior. It is desired behavior. After that, it is reinforcement, rewards. One, how many rewards we should pay for the desired behavior. Two, in what time duration. It is called timing of reward, of reinforcement. At first, continuous reinforcement schedule. It's mean reinforcing a behavior every time it occurs. Good things, desired action, reinforcement. It is continuous reinforcement schedule. Every time you do some desired action, we will reinforce you. We give you some rewards. Learning occurs more rapidly. The result is very, very rapidly, but not so deeply. In this type of scheduling, the reinforcement, learning occurs so rapidly, but not persistently, not deeply, so rapidly. This is our good, our desired action, and this is your reinforcement. Every time you have some good action, some desired action, you will receive your reinforcement, your reward. So you want to learn it and learn it and learn it and do it and practice and progress and practice and progress. And after that, we have some good learning, but not for the long term. Exact the time your rewards will be cut, your behavior will be extinct. We have some extinction. The second part is partial or intermittent reinforcement schedule. Reinforcing a behavior, some of the time it occurs, not always. And it is completely random. Sometimes, for example, after 3 times of recurrence of the desired behavior, we have some reinforcement. The doer, the performer, someone who is doing some desired actions doesn't know about the program, about the scheduling of reinforcement. He or she is always expecting some rewards. Sometimes disappointed, sometimes hopeful, why not? Sometimes success. He or she will receive the rewards. It is intermittent schedule, not continuous. Continuous, every time you do something, you will receive your reward. In intermittent, it is randomly with no schedule. And not all of the behavior lasts longer. Okay, learning is not so fast, like, for example, continuous. But long-lasting behavior. Why? You do again, you do again, you do. It is something like gambling. When you are losing your money in gambling, gambler says, another round, another round, another round, with the wish to win the game. And finally, they lose all their money. Long lasting behaviors. So if you want to create something for people, you should give them some intermittent. It is very important for business, for management, especially in the companies, especially in the factories. You should know these models of creating and reinforcing people when they are working for you. It is about the reward system in your future company, your future business. You see that when it is continuous, people create, people learn so rapidly, but not for long-lasting behaviors, long-lasting learning. Only until the time that they will receive the reward, they do the things at the same time, at the same procedure, and with a good quality. Ending the reward, ending the learning. But in intermittent, they are expecting some new rewards. Sometimes they receive, sometimes they don't receive. And fixed ratio skills. Fixed ratio, it is intermittent, but it has a fixed ratio. What does it mean? It means that you will receive some rewards, but in a fixed ratio. For example, after 3, or for example 5 from 10, if you do something 10 times, every time you reach to the ratio of, for example, 7 to 10, which is called 70%, you will receive your reinforcement, your rewards. It is facial. And variable ratio schedule enforcement occurs after a varying number of responses. For example, telephone salesperson jobs. We don't know how many telephones a salesperson should answer. But after a variable ratio, they will give some rewards for their action. These are the model of scheduling. It is very important for you, very, very important to know how to schedule about reinforcement. A very good phrase we have here. Shaping. What is shaping? When we talk about shaping, everybody looks at the muscle shaping. How can you shape and good form for your muscle? Everybody knows it. Go to the gym and hire a personal coach, and they will show you and teach you how to shape your muscle. But how can we use the word for behavior? It's a very old phrase in behaviorism, the phrase of shaping behavior. It is very old, very initial word. From the first years of the movement of behaviorism by J.B. Watson in America, we had a phrase with the title of shaping behavior. What does it mean, shaping behavior? It means that your behavior is something like your muscle. If you practice more, you will progress more, and during the time, your behavior will shape. Yes, it is just like that. Shaping. The process of teaching the complex behavior, not simple behavior, complex behavior, by rewarding closer and closer approximation of the desired behavior. I cut out a complex behavior to very simple portion of behavior, very simple portion. And after that, we put together those simple portions. The process of teaching a complex behavior by rewarding closer and closer approximation of the desired behavior. It is shaping. And again, simple behaviors come together, shaping a complex behavior. It is sometimes it is called reversal engineering from the end to the start point, not from a start point to the ending point. We see the final product we want to produce in a company, in a business, in a person, the final product, and you see and cut out the stages until the present stage that you are now. And after that, from this stage, you will start to go to the final, the stages. For example, you want to have a master degree, a scholarship from Harvard. It's your final product you want. You break it, break it, break it, break it until now. You know that what the steps you should pass to reach that steps. It is reversal or reverse engineering from the end to the start point, from the end to the first stage. Shaping is something like this. You desire a good behavior, you know what's your desired behavior, what's your desired mindset, what your desire, for example, emotion you want to create in your life. It is very systematic, very systematic. It is engineering of human actions, engineering of human actions. Please go to the Stanford and see the persuasive technology. There is a chapter in the Stanford site which is called persuasive technology. I think I forgot the name of the professor. I think professor is Professor Frog, something like this. Professor Frog, the persuasive technology. Now you can find in the site of Stanford University. It is something like that. Very, very systematic. Very systematic. Are we machines? Yes. In some parts of our behaviors, we are like machines. And in some parts of your thinking and emotion, we are like some smart machines, not mechanical machines. But I have, as a human being, some part of systematic relationship with different parts of me, my thought, my body, my mind, my emotions, my culture, my religion, my actions, my behaviors, my habits. There's a good book. There's a very, very good book. I think that this book is from that professor I talked about him just now, Dr. Frog, I think. There's a good book by that professor. The name of the book is Tiny Habits. Tiny Habits. How can create or defeat your habits? Create new habits or defeat the old habits. Tiny habits. Very, very small habits. Tiny habits. Very systematic. Behavioral change is very systematic. It is simple. We make it simple. It is not simple. We make it simple by looking at it very systematically from the starting point to the stopping point. It's like a race. There's a start point, there's a stop point, and the pathway from a start to a stop. It is race. Very systematic, step by step. Fantastic. We know about it near more than uh, half a century, more than half a century. It is about 90, yes, it is near 1 century that we know the science of behavior, the science of changing behavior, shaping behavior, the process of behaviorism, the end stage, how we can extinction the behavior. We talk about it. It was about conditional. It is about classical conditioning. Now we are talking about operant conditioning and shaping behavior and other parts. It's a science. It's the most observable part of psychology. It's a science. You can observe other people's behaviors. It is not important how they think or how they feel. You, as an observer, you can observe their behaviors. It is important how they feel or how they think, because their actions, their behavior is the end stage of the emotion. Emotions are the end stages of thinking. Thinking, feeling, action. But what you can see the behaviors. Behaviors are the observable parts of your mind. In these parts, shaping behavior, it's a good systematic approach to behavior in all universities, great universities, especially in Stanford. The process of teaching complex behavior. First, reinforce only behavior that is remotely similar to the desired behavior. Remotely similar. Then reinforce only responses that are closer to that behavior. They then reinforce only the desired behavior. From the end to the first stage, to the starting point. At first, only reinforce the remote desire. Not these are not very. There is no a high likelihood between those behaviors and our desired behavior. Again, we come back to the more closer. finally we reach to the just the same behavior that we want. Okay, shaping, basic principle, nature of behavior, and order of event, and example. For example, in shaping, how we can shaping based on classical conditioning, how we can have shaping based on operant conditioning. The next part, it is about cognitive approaches. These parts were behavioral approaches to learning. How we can learn new behaviors by classical conditioning or operant conditioning. Why cognitive approaches? B.F. Skinner, the founder and the father of operant conditioning, works with the pigeons, works with the rats. And he was so smart. He was so smart. And he has a very good book by the title of Walden 2. Walden 1 is a philosophical book by Henry Thoreau. Henry Thoreau is a poet and author and thinker of 19th century of US. Henry Thoreau. He has a book with the title of Walden, Waldon, Walden, based upon the utopia, the final multi-dimensional heaven for human beings. It is called utopia, the idealistic city for our beings. Based on that, and based on behaviorism, after Walden, after I think 100 years, the founder of operant conditioning wrote a book by the title of Walden 2. Walden 2 is a city that is governed based on behaviorism. Skinner, B.F. Skinner. But there was a problem. After some time, we found that we are not rats. We are not pigeons. We are not bunnies. We can create some fixed ratio behavior in rats. We can create some fixed ratio behaviors, for example, in bunnies, in pigeons. But human being always ask some questions and change the patterns, and it is out of control. Why? Because I am not a rat. I am Homo sapiens. I'm a smart being, and I have a basic and strong sense of curiosity, asking questions, and courage to create change on my own idea, not on your own idea as my psychologist. This sense of curiosity, this love of learning, this creating idea about the world, and it is called sometimes for example, creating theories about the world and testing the hypotheses and other parts of scientific method are related to our cognition, rationality, intellectuality. Specific in psychology, it is called cognition and metacognition. Metacognition is mean we are the only being on the earth that ask about our asking, that think about our thinking, that we have a feeling of depression on our depression. We are anxious about our anxiety. I have anxiety, and after that, I am so anxious about my anxiety. Why I am so anxious? Anxiety about anxiety, depression about depression, thinking about thinking, knowledge about knowledge. We are not the only being in the world that have the ability to think, but we are the only being on the earth that we have the ability to think about our thinking. Is our thinking good or bad? It is the thinking about thinking. It is called metacognition. We are the only being in the world that have the ability to think about our thinking, to have cognition about our cognition. It is called metacognition sometimes. Sorry, I bring the charger. Explain latent learning and how it works in humans. You see here the word humans, not animal. Is there anything so-called animal psychology? Yes. The major principal part of psychology is related to animal psychology. At the first, especially in learning, not in psychoanalysis, not in hypnotherapy, these are completely humanistic psychology. We have some types of hypnosis, for example, on human beings, not in cows, not in cats, not in rats and pigeons and other animals. But in behaviorism, some part which is related to observable and measurable parts of the human mind, it's a major part is about animal psychology. We have worked with pigeons, with rats, with bunnies and other animals. Now in circus, we use the models of creating and shaping behavior in animals. For example, lions, tigers, monkeys. You see many different wild animals that we have created, we have shaped, sometimes of exact details, specific behaviors in them. We use them in circus. So a major part of behaviorism is related to animal psychology. Because of that matter, because of that issue, was that little Albert went to the court and has created some lawsuit against his mother and Dr. J.B. Watson, because he said, sorry, you can check it on the animals, not on me. I'm not a rat. I'm not a pigeon. I'm Albert. I'm your son. And you have some experiment on me. You have created intentionally fear on me. And now I am a fearful. He went to court. Cognitive learning theory. What is cognitive learning theory? Focuses on the thought process or cognitions that underlie learning. What are the basic beliefs that we use in learning? For example, if you think that you are a smart student, it's different from the student that he or she think that, no, I'm not so smart. What about the memory? What about the rehearsal? What about the recall? What about the attention? What about the concentration? What about the ADHD? What about the problems in learning disabilities or learning problems? All are cognitive learning theory. The elements of cognitive elements that interfere with the process of learning in human beings. It is cognitive learning theory. We have behavioral learning theory. We have classical learning theory, operant learning theory, and now we have cognitive learning theory. The theory talks about the elements interfere together in learning process in human, especially in human beings, not in animals, especially in human beings. And what is latent learning? Learning in which a new behavior is occurred but is not demonstrated until some incentive provided for displaying. You learn some new behavior, but you cannot manifest it. You cannot show it to until the times of incentive. It is latent learning, learning for long term, learning for the next stage of your life. It is cognitive, your cognitive map, mental representations of spatial locations and directions. For example, you use it in basketball, you use it in driving, you use it in dancing. It is cognitive map, elements of thinking that they should work together to create a cognition in your mind. Sometimes it is a spatial map. For example, in basketball and driving, you have a mental map. Sometimes it is about relationship. You think that, for example, you don't love that boy or that girl, and how do you think about him or her, and how he or she think about you. It is your cognitive map, a map of cognition, a map of thought that's related together to shape a total map, to shape a total concept about the behaviors or other people's behaviors. It is observational learning. The last part is the most interesting part of learning. It is observational learning, not learning based on conditioning, not based on learning based on your cognitions or thinking or thought processes or thinking styles, learning based on your observation, observational learning, learning by watching the behavior of another person. Albert Bandura call it the social cognitive approach, your social learning. It's a model. How can you see other people behaviors, especially in adolescence? The major source of learning, the major source of acquiring the socialized, socially acceptable behavior, which is called socializations. Some parts of also it is socialization. Some parts of socialization is about how can you acquire the current culture of your society. Sometimes, for example, in minorities, if you are from a minor community, if you are, for example, Hispanic, or like me, you are Persian, you come from another country, another culture to a different culture, and you have some cross-cultural conflict. You don't know what is good or what is bad. Your training, basic training, family of original training is something different with the culture you are living now. It is cross-cultural conflict, the conflict between two different cultures, which are conflictual. We cannot be compatible and compatible with this culture with the new culture, the old culture with the new culture. Especially in adolescence, the major question in adolescence is, who am I? I need my identity. Who am I? On violence in the media, the last part research supports the claim that watching high levels of media violence makes viewers more susceptible to acting aggressively. We talked about it. One study found 1/4 of violent young male offenders had attempted a media-inspired copycat crime. Media-inspired copycat crime. 1/4. One study found 1/4 of violent young male offenders had attempted a media-inspired copycat crime. Because of that, we have some PGA, parent guiding advice. For example, we say PGA for Fortnite is at least 13. Why? It is not good, not bad. In the age of 12 to 14, you are again shaping your mind as a new part of ending adolescence. In that part, you are trimming your mind, trimming the extra data. You are shaping your new models of behavior. Because of that, you can say, yes, it's good or bad. In that time, you have something like Fortnite. Not for a young adult or for the adult, for a young adolescence between 12 to 14, only 2 years. We are trimming again our mind. Yes, I am not the child, I'm not the adult. I'm in the middle way. I'm the middle stage of my between childhood and adulthood. I'm adolescence. I'm entering the first stage of adolescence, 12 to 14. Because of that, we have PGA, parent guidance advices. Okay, so let's go to the quiz for any question? Amy, Matthew, any question?
I have a question.
What's your question?
So what does it mean, like susceptible?
Skeptical, it is mean that the higher probability, it is higher probability to do the same actions. When you see some active aggression in the movies, you are susceptible to acting aggressively. It is more highly probability to do the same actions in yourself. You are susceptible. You are ready. You are prepared to do the same things. Matthew?
So about the violence in the media, I've heard like arguments that like some people who play violent video games are also susceptible to doing the same act of violence that they view from the game. Is that like also valid or a true statement?
In the games, there is a new version because you have virtual reality in games. Games are more dangerous than movies. Why? Your mind create and experience the same crime in your brain because of virtual reality. your mind cannot distinguish between reality and virtual reality. It is more dangerous, more hazardous than the movies, because the movies, you know that it is movie. Your brain is also only concentrated by your eyes. By in head mounted with the shield, for example, 5 dimensions, your mind, your brain cannot distinguish between the virtual world and real world. And if you are experiencing sometimes of shooting, of dying, when I started to do it only for 1 month, I have never, guns have never been interested for me. Never, from my childhood. I never liked it to have gun and shooting. Only for 1 month, by mistake, I found a sniper game in my mobile. Very simple, very simple. After 1 month, I felt that, I have some new interest to have some aggression. Only 1 month with a very simple application by sniper shooting. Very simple sniper. And I was 45. I was in middle age at that time, not in adolescence. My brain was formed completely, but it has some impact. So in the games, it is more dangerous and more hazardous than movies, especially in the virtual reality games, VRG, virtual reality games, with the head mountain you use, or the glasses you use in your eyes. Any question?
No, no questions.
Okay.
No, Professor.
Have a good quiz. Bye.
Professor,
What's up, Amy?
I think I already finished my quiz.
Okay, no problem.
Okay, so
Okay.
I have a question.
What's?
So next week is our midterm
Yes.
examinations, but
Yes.
can I use my textbook? Like just for like.
Yeah. No. Midterm quiz is very simple from the very simple questions. Very simple questions. You can check only the sample question in your book and audio in your site. It's very simple. Very important, but very simple, not very deep.
Is it too difficult?
For who? For me, it is not difficult.
No, I mean like.
No, I don't think it is. I know you. I know that you are a very hard worker student. No, I think it is not so difficult for you.
Oh, is it? Yeah. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Have a nice evening.
You too. Bye.
Bye.
Take care, Professor.